Now, I've been a Windows user my whole life, apart from a couple of years with a 2006 model of the MacBook Pro. And not only did Windows 11 come as a bit of a surprise to me, but I've recently been considering switching over to a Mac because of Apple Silicon. So does this new release of Windows change that? So now we know that Windows 10 is not the last version of Windows. We instead have Windows 11, which I assume means that at some point we're going to be getting Windows 12 and then maybe 13. But actually Android is on 12 already, and macOS Monterey is the 18th iteration of that OS, so perhaps Microsoft could do with skipping a few numbers just to catch up. Well, first, a few thoughts about the changes to Windows 11 itself, and to be honest with you, I find most of the headline features pretty underwhelming. I'm going to be doing a separate video about the copycat features and similarities between Windows 11 and macOS Monterey in the next few weeks, so be sure to subscribe if you'd like to see that. But most of the new features, so-called, in Windows 11 you can already achieve in Windows 10, such as snapping windows, moving desktops and Teams. That said, there are three reasons why I'm delaying a potential switch over to macOS. The jury is still out, but I think if Microsoft can really implement these three things really well, then I think they could be onto a winner. And I'm going to order these from least to most important. One of the most interesting aspects of Windows 11 is the emphasis that Microsoft is putting on healthy competition, even within its own OS. And this is a part of the presentation where I feel they couldn't help but make a few healthy digs at Apple, who over the past few years have been working on making their own ecosystem so tightly integrated, where even I've been thinking, well, if I get a Mac, then I'm probably going to need an iPhone, and then I'll probably want an iPad, and I'll probably want some AirPods to sync with them, and then probably a HomePod Mini, and probably then a subscription to Apple Music, and it just goes on and on. It's not particularly that I have to buy everything Apple, but it just works so nicely together. Whereas Microsoft and Windows seem to be wanting to differentiate themselves in saying, we've made Teams, it works brilliantly, but if you want to use Zoom instead, that's fine. Effectively, we're going to all the trouble to make these killer features, but if you want to use something else instead, then you can go ahead and you'll get all the benefits of Windows 11, but using whichever software and system you want to. So that's a very different approach on paper, at least. Whether it will or not be actually the case, or whether there will be subtle attempts by Microsoft to get you to use their versions of things all the time, remains to be seen. Remember, this is the organization that 15 years or so ago were charged $800 million by the European Union for anti-competitive behavior. How times may have changed. Now, and this is probably the most obvious one, we have Android apps on Windows through the Amazon App Store. Now, I've had a look, and most of the main apps that I would use personally appear to be on there. Do leave a comment if you have a look on the Amazon App Store and see apps not available that you would normally like to use on your Android phone. But I do think this poses some new questions for developers. For example, one of the apps that I use on my Android, which is actually not available on the Amazon App Store, is Pocket Casts for listening to podcasts. And they have a business model where the Android and Apple versions of their app are free, but you have to pay or subscribe in order to get the desktop versions. So it'll be interesting to see if developers can differentiate between designing an app for one operating system that's then used on another, and how they deal with those lines being blurred between Android and Windows, and whether it affects their business models. I mean, somehow in the last 15 years we've gone from designing websites for mobiles to designing mobile apps for PCs. So it's going to raise some interesting questions. I've read a very good article on why Microsoft decided to partner with Amazon rather than Google for the App Store, and I'll link that to the description below, so be sure to check that out. But finally, and this was the real kicker for me, there was a hint in the presentation that Intel and AMD are working on their next iteration of chipsets being very tightly integrated with Windows 11 and bringing considerable performance benefits because of it. In a way, this was obvious that this was going to happen. I was reading the other day that Apple have taken 10% of Intel's market share, which is pretty massive. But it's also the reason why I would not want to buy a Windows device right now. If this is true, and it should be, then in the same way that nobody wanted to buy a Mac in the period of time between Apple announcing the move to their own silicon and bringing out the M1 chip, then nobody's going to want to buy a Windows device in this period of time between Windows 11 being announced and the next iteration of Intel and AMD chips being made available. Bear in mind, I was reading that nearly 50% of Intel's revenue comes from Dell, HP and Lenovo. Then surely the next version of their chipset is going to be well worth waiting for, if indeed it is optimized specifically to work best with Windows 11, which it really should be. If you enjoyed this video, then please give it a like and comment below with your thoughts on Windows 11, and be sure to subscribe for future thoughts on whatever I happen to be thinking about in a given week.